Good afternoon. Welcome to the Project Call 3.1 Stage 1 webinar. I'm Chris Roberts. I'll be hosting and running through the slides for this webinar this afternoon, or this morning if you're on the West Coast. So this is focused on NIMBL Project Call 3.1. For those who are not familiar with NIMBL, it's the National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals. Our mission is to accelerate biopharmaceutical manufacturing innovation and to support the development of standards that enable more efficient and rapid manufacturing capabilities, as well as to educate and train a world-class leading biopharmaceutical manufacturing workforce. Project Call 3.1, or PC 3.1, is seeking proposals that address technology, workforce development, and global health priority areas that have been identified by our industry members. The vernacular you're going to see later on, or the abbreviations, will be PC 3.1T is for technology projects, PC 3.1W is for workforce projects, and PC 3.1G is within our new Global Health Fund projects. For those of you who are familiar with prior project calls, the Global Health Fund projects will be new, and we're going to highlight some of the differences as we go along. So here's an overview, a graphical overview of how PC 3.1 is going to run in terms of both timings and some of the logistics. So stage 1, which is where this webinar is primarily focused, is on the concept paper phase, which includes concept papers submitted electronically as ideas with details to be sorted out in a moment, or to be enumerated upon in a moment, followed by a face-to-face summit, and then that helps to determine which projects are invited to a full proposal, and then that moves into stage 2, and we'll provide more details further on in this webinar. But you can see the timings here, and we'll review these timings a little in more detail as we go along. So at a high level, PC 3.1T can be broken out as follows. There are two major categories, or two categories for the proposals. You're either in a small proposal category, which is defined based on the amount of funds asked for from NIMBL. So if you are less than or equal to $300,000 in the ask from NIMBL, you're in the small proposal category, and that requires a 1-to-1 to cost share. Large proposals are in the category of less than or equal to 600,000 as the ask from NIMBL, and then it's a 1 to 1.25 cost share, where the 1 is from NIMBL and the 1.25 is from the team. All proposals, independent of small or large, need to have a duration of less than or equal to 12 months. The total funding amount that's been allocated and approved for PC 3.1 combined between PC 3.1 for T, which is the technology, and the workforce, we'll talk about in a second, is $4 million, and we'll reiterate that in a moment. We'll also come back to later a little bit about some of the cost share questions. So a bit more detail about PC 3.1T. The concept paper needs to be submitted, or must be submitted, by an individual from a NIMBL member organization or a federal employee. You do not have to have teaming at that stage, but we highly encourage that teams to try and form before or at that point. But we also acknowledge that in some cases the ideas will need more time and go through the concept paper phase in order to be able to identify key team members. It also provides an opportunity to recruit new members to NIMBL. But again, to reiterate, the individual / the organization that's submitting the concept paper must be a member of NIMBL at the time of submission of the concept paper for a PC 3.1T submission. We'll talk about some of the nuances of the other ones in a moment. For a full proposal, all participants on the proposal on the team must be NIMBL members or federal employees in order to be part of an accepted, part of a proposal that will be allowed to move through to full proposal stage. You must have at least 2 organizations in order to submit a full proposal. Those do not have to include a Tier 3 industry member, but we highly encourage Tier 3 industry member participation. In terms of that's a separation between the concept paper and the full proposal stage. For the concept paper stage, budgets and cost share are not required. We highly encourage teams to have started to work on that, but they're not required at the concept paper phase. That is a NIMBL perspective. However, your individual institution may require you to have more of those details fleshed out at the time of submission, for even just for a concept paper. So a bit more of detail in terms of PC 3.1T. And so there are 7 topical areas that have been identified based on input that we've had through a number of sources. We've done outreach to in multiple waves to our current members, as well as other key stakeholders, to determine what would be key areas to focus on for Project Call 3.1T, while also considering where the Institute has already invested heavily and to try and balance all of those considerations. I'm not going to read off all of the areas. You can read all of these in the RFP. So I'll stress now, and I'll stress again throughout the webinar, that this is one format that we're providing information, some guidance. However, all of the details, including details that are not given here in full detail, are all provided on our website under the project calls or the request for proposals RFPs for 3.1T, 3.1W, and 3.1G. So I'll say it now and I'll reiterate again later. For full details, always refer back to those published documents on the website. And for any questions, we'll give some resources later on in the webinar for you to refer to and to reach out to us if you have questions. In all cases, if you do have a question or you feel there's a concern that something is uncertain about what the requirements are, always reach out to us first. And if there's any confusion, please don't hesitate to reach out and rather than make assumptions. So we're going to introduce the idea of manufacturing readiness level because not all of those on the call are NIMBL members who have seen this before. But a manufacturing readiness level is a way of trying to assess where within the scope from early stage research, which would normally be defined as a level 1, all the way to full commercialized products, which could be a level 9, a level 10, depending on what scale you've seen. For NIMBL and other members of the Manufacturing USA Institutes, we're focused on the intermediate ground, which is typically termed in terms of readiness levels 4 through 7. And this is a generic slide at this level. And so you don't want to concentrate too much except to realize that where you need to be focusing is on the intermediate stage, not at the research stage, which is on the far left, and not necessarily on the late stage into commercialization. Though the higher the readiness level, the more impactful it is for our institute and for our members. Any of the proposals that are provided in the concept stage need to focus on readiness level 4 through 7. And it needs to be a readiness level that's relevant to biopharmaceutical manufacturing, not necessarily the readiness levels that have been developed for other industries. So we stress that here because we're working on updated guidance for the readiness levels as it pertains to manufacturing in a biopharmaceutical context. We're going to be providing that guidance in more detail separately, and so we're not going to spend much time here, but just to reiterate, especially for those who are new to this context and to this institute, that this is the world in which you need to live in terms of where you're focusing your topic area. So for PC 3.1T, there's a concept paper. There's a maximum of 4 pages. There should be a single, the constraints are a single-spaced 11-point Arial font or larger equivalent. This will be uploaded as a single PDF through an online site that we have and will make available to you. Please mark this as NIMBL confidential because Again, all of the PC 3.1T topics or concepts have to be provided by NIMBL members, and so fall within all of the constraints and the confidentiality that is inherent with being a NIMBL member. So the concept summary slide is new for those of you who have been through this in the last call or a prior call. We're also requiring a single slide that summarizes your project. We're not constraining you to the format of that, except that it keeps to a standard size. You can upload this in a standard PowerPoint format. Please also mark this as NIMBL confidential. It's a complement, not a replacement to your concept paper, but it provides an alternative way for our reviewers ahead of the summit to be able to assess the different concepts and give feedback, and also to help them assess where they're going to engage with you at the summit, which is the summit is the face-to-face. So here's a bit of a checklist. This is also summarized. Again, I'll reiterate, this is all in the RFP, which you can download from our website. So some of the obvious things in terms of you indicate the name and the organization of the submitter. If you have more than one organization involved, because you've identified your team, enumerate on that. Of course, you need a title, your topic to be addressed, which is a key. Again, we've identified in the RFP what are the topic areas you need to fit within. If you have project team partners already identified, please elaborate on that. And if you have desired project team partners, another one within this vein is that if you've identified a key need, for example, if you're coming from an industrial perspective and you've identified a key need and the expertise needed, but are seeking the partners in order to work on this together, that's another way to approach this. Identify things like the background and significance of the problem to be solved. Don't leave out the current state of the art, and at least a summary of what you perceive to be the existing solutions to solve the problem and why yours, of course, is an improvement upon that. Description of the proposed concept. As I said, we'll be providing some guidance on how to define the manufacturing readiness level of a given concept. You need to use that to help you justify where you sit in that space, and also where you expect that you would move to by the end of the project if successful. Last but not least, you need to have identified and elaborate, I should say, explain upon what the value proposition is to your partners on the team, also to NIMBL and the NIMBL community at large, and the United States biopharmaceutical manufacturing industry more broadly. And considerations include, but don't have to be exhaustive. This is not an exhaustive list, but include return on investment, time to impact in the industry, and how you plan to transition the readiness level so that you move upwards towards full commercialization. The summary slide, the points are listed here. They're very much a similar set of ideas to the prior slide, but again, realizing that this is a one-slide summary, it's more graphical. It's a different way to portray your ideas and attract the attention of potential partners, as well as those who are going to assess the potential impact for themselves from an industry perspective. So project call 3.1W or PC 3.1W. So there are going to be a lot of similarities in the next few slides. I'm going to highlight some of those, but more the differences. So we again have small and large proposals. The small proposals are a 1-to-1 cost share. The large proposals are a 1 to 1.25 cost share. Within the workforce project call 3.1, we also have planning grants. These are much smaller. Those are restricted to less than or equal to $60,000. It's a 1-to-1 cost share. For the small and large proposals, those have to be less than or equal to 12 months in duration. The planning grants need to be 6 months or fewer in duration. We mentioned it before, I'll reiterate again, that the total funding that's allocated between PC 3.1T, the technology side, and 3.1W, the workforce development side, is $4 million. It's not necessarily an equal split. That will be decided later based on the proposals that come in and the decisions based on our governing council, governing committee. So this is analogous to the earlier slide for PC 3.1T, where we've identified the key topics, and again, that has been done based on a lot of input from our key stakeholders, academic, industrial, federal partners, to help focus PC 3.1W. And so we have the two main areas are incumbent worker training solutions and industry awareness and pipeline development, where the second one has been broken out into a couple of key areas. Not a lot of details here, just like in the similar slide for PC 3.1T, whereas there are full details with paragraphs of explanation, suggestions, and examples. Those are all in the full RFP. So again, refer to those full RFP documents on our website for greater detail. This slide is extremely similar to, or basically almost exactly the same as the Project Call 3.1T slide. Just reiterate again, for those who are new to our project calls, that at the concept paper phase, the lead proposer or more of the members of the team must be an individual from a NIMBL member organization or federal employee. You don't have to know more than that, but if you know more than that, that's highly encouraged. At the full proposal stage, all of the partners on the project will need to be NIMBL members from across the different tiers, both academic and industry, and federal partners. The budget and cost share, again, no cost share budget information is required at the concept paper stage, but your organization may require you to have already identified that in order to submit something. And certainly if it's going to be a long process to get approval for those cost share elements, for example, you want to begin that as early as possible. The details for the concept paper and this concept summary slide are exactly the same at this level for Project Call 3.1W as they were for 3.1T, so I won't dwell on those. In terms of the checklist for 3.1W, there's really one major one to call out, which is that the idea of a manufacturing readiness level is not so well defined when talking about workforce development projects, so we're not calling that out as a requirement in the concept paper phase. In terms of the summary slide, it's analogous to what and cover PC 3.1G. So Project Call 3.1G refers to the Global Health Fund component of PC 3.1 for the project call that's just been released. So in this case, there's only one type of proposal. There isn't a short and long term. So all proposals fall in one category where the total ask from NIMBL has to be less than or equal to $1.5 million. The cost share ratio is 1:1, and the proposal duration needs to fit within 18 months. The total funding allocated for PC 3.1G is $1.5 million. NIMBL anticipates funding up to 3 projects. That doesn't mean it will be 3, but up to 3 projects. That doesn't mean they'll all be equal, and we'll get into a bit more of those details in a second. So through conversations and discussions with a number of key stakeholders, including the Developing Country Vaccine Manufacturers Network, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and key NIMBL stakeholders and NIMBL members, 4 topic areas have been identified for the PC 3.1G or PC 3.1 Global Health Fund initiative. So those will be new both to our current members as well as those non-members who may be online. So you'll see a theme here. So replacing animal-based adventitious agent testing, creating a series of tools to support novel in vitro AA testing, identifying new in vitro release tests focused on replacing animal-based release testing in vaccine manufacturing QC, and or addressing the shortage of suitable reagents for existing legacy vaccines. So other than the topic area, some additional features that are different about PC 3.1G compared to our more now familiar PC 3.1T and W calls are that the concept paper in this case, the lead proposer does not need to be a NIMBL member. So any individual or federal employee is eligible to submit a concept paper to 3.1G. Similar to the other ones, you don't have to have your team completely identified by that point, although we encourage you to start that as early as possible. However, similar to the other PC 3.1 calls, for the full proposal, the lead organization and all of the partners of the proposal team must be NIMBL members. It turns out, I'll show you some dates in a little bit, but just very soon before the submission of the full proposal. Similar to the other two PC 3.1 calls, the proposal must have at least 2 partner organizations, which then would be 2 NIMBL member organizations. And again, we highly encourage you to include Tier 3 industry member participation. Right, so these details are no different between PC 3.1G and the PC 3.1T or W. So these are mostly formatting issues and constraints around size and the scope of the, or should I say size of the details. And when we get into the scope, if you think of this as a checklist, much of this is exactly the same except as you get to the bottom bullet. So this is very similar to 3.1T, except at the bottom bullet, the main difference is that in addition to showing the value proposition for your team members, for the Institute and the larger NIMBL community, also you need to factor in the needs of the global health market, including the expected benefits to people in low and lower middle income countries, because this is within the Global Health Fund context. So in terms of the concept summary slide, it's again a similar set of guidelines as it was for PC 3.1T and 3.1W. So there are some differences, however, when we get into some comparison of the concept paper and the full proposal stage. So the concept paper phase, it's very similar to the other two that we've enumerated already, which is that there is no cost share or budget information required. But again, if your host organization requires that for you to be able to submit, you need to check with them. For the full proposal stage, full budgets and cost share details are required for all project partners that are requesting funds from NIMBL or committing cost share towards the project. We'll talk about cost share again towards the end. Something that's a bit different with respect to PC 3.1G, that is, any proposal that's focused on the Global Health Fund initiative needs to realize that the indirect cost recovery rules are a bit different. So indirect costs budgeted within that fund must adhere to the indirect cost policy of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is different than the other guidelines we have, or the other rules we have for PC 3.1, W, and T. If you have specific questions, please reach out to us. We have the email link there, projectcalls@nimbl.org. But all of them must also still fit within 2 CFR 200, also known as Uniform Guidance, because those are the rules under which NIMBL must operate as well. So section 3.3 of the RFP has this in much more detail than what we have on the slides here. So I recommend that you read that first before posing questions to projectcalls@nimbl.org, but we'll work with you to help identify the answers for your organization as they come in. So this slide's a little busy, and again, one that we have to call out because it's something new and different even for our members with PC 3.1G. So projects that are launched as part of the Global Health Fund have different requirements in terms of intellectual property compared to those that our current members are used to. For those who are not NIMBL members yet, this will be new as well, but we just want to highlight, I'm not going to read off all the words in this slide, just highlight that there are questions around global access commitments, humanitarian licenses, publication, and intellectual property reporting that are specific to work that is done within the auspices of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And as we're teaming with them on the PC 3.1G, all projects within that project call are under those rules as well. Again, if you have questions, reach out to us at the website that we showed on the previous slide. All right, so after proposals are submitted, or I should say concept papers are submitted, and we'll go back to the dates again in a moment, we'll have a face-to-face PC 3.1 summit, which will be joint between the technology, the workforce, and the Global Health Fund, within some logistics that are still being worked out. So this is tentatively scheduled for October 23rd to 24th, but it will definitely be held during the week of October 23rd. The exact date may move by 1 or 2 based on venue availability and the logistics of how this will be run. So the audience, those who will be able to attend in person, will be the invited presenters, so those from the concept papers who are invited to move to this stage, NIMBL industry representatives who may or may not also be presenters, federal representatives also, again, who may or may not be presenters, and then representatives from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation focused on PC 3.1G only. The format is that this will be poster presentations only, where we have built in a lot of time for Q&A, networking, and face-to-face discussion. So for those who were involved in the previous project call and the concept paper and the summit, we are not having the rapid fire short presentations this time, oral presentations this time. We've moved based on extensive feedback and from all of our stakeholders, all of our members, we've moved to a poster presentation format only that also dovetails into where the one page or the one slide PowerPoint comes in during the formal submission during the concept paper phase, in order to help streamline that and focus people's efforts in that face-to-face Q&A and poster session networking during the summit. Now, all concept papers that are invited to the summit will have been reviewed prior to that and made sure that they align with the requirements outlined in the respective RFP. So at the summit, we'll have NIMBL industry members will be present to evaluate the proposed concepts for the purpose of inviting full proposal submissions, and they'll have a number of considerations that they'll take into account. So those who are presenting at the summit need to keep in mind that for technology projects, these 4 are the key criteria, and this is all enumerated in the RFP for PC 3.1T, so you can read more there. But keep in mind, all 4 are important. It's not a question of hitting only a subset of these. All of these are important for being invited to a full proposal. Similarly, for the workforce, there'll also be a set of members who will be evaluating the workforce proposals or concept papers. And these are the 3, which basically the main difference between this and the prior list is what we noted earlier, which is that manufacturing readiness levels are not necessarily appropriate or straightforward, is perhaps the better term, to apply to workforce development. So instead focus on the key topic areas in the RFP for PC 3.1W. For PC 3.1G, this is the text here is essentially analogous to what it is for PC 3.1T, except realizing again that it needs to also address the needs of the global health market and the focus area of the Global Health Fund. Right, so a graphical summarization of what we've, or a summary, sorry, of what we've covered so far is that stage one, which is focused primarily on the concept paper phase, as well as the summit, which is a face-to-face, is leading up to the invitations for a full proposal. So the target date for notifying proposers that they've been invited, or proposal teams that they've been invited to a full proposal, is late November. Exact date has not been set yet, but we'll update that as we have it. So once one goes past the concept paper phase, just to give a flavor for where this will go next, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but once the concept paper phase and the invitations to full proposals are finished, at that point, we will help teams to form, but the idea is that teams will have started to form already, if not have already congealed at the summit and beforehand. But if they haven't, there still will be some time and opportunity to expand your team or to strengthen your team by networking with our large industry members, which are the tier 1, tier 2, and affiliate industry partners, our tier 3 industry members. Again, we always encourage that to help to bring in the diversity and some of those new technologies and new ideas. Academic members, again, for the same reason, not-for-profits, federal employees, based on what their organization will allow, depending on which agency or portion of the federal government they work with. But also, before the full proposals, there still is time and there still is the opportunity to bring in non-members. So as the phrase might say, expand the network. So you can reach out to non-members. We will help as best we can, but that initiative is on you. And that, because there is still an opportunity, and we'll show in a moment that, or reiterate in a moment what the deadlines are, but we'll put it up here on this slide, that the project teams must all be NIMBL members for a full proposal submission by no later than February 6th of next year, 2020. The actual full proposals are due slightly later than that. But essentially, at the time you submit your proposal, your full proposal, all members, all partners on the team must be NIMBL members, whether it's in PC 3.1T, PC 3.1W, or PC 3.1G. All right, so here's a graphical summary of some of the deadlines. So September 10th, concept papers are due, 5 p.m. Eastern. There are no exceptions, pending natural disaster or something, which has thankfully not happened yet for any of these. The PC 3.1 Summit will be the week of October 23rd. As soon as we lock down the dates and venue, we'll distribute that widely. Again, that's not limited. Your team members do not all have to be NIMBL members, but to attend the summit, you'll find that anyone who's attending the summit, because that's the person proposing it, or the individual proposing it, they do have to be a member. So that summit is member only, except for the Global Health Fund portion of the summit. Full proposal invitations will go out by late November. That will kick you into stage 2, and there will be more information around stage 2 provided via a webinar analogous to this when we get to that point. Full proposals are due by the 13th of February. As we mentioned on the previous slide, all members of the team, no matter which project call you're responding to, whether it's 3.1T, W, or G, all members of the team must be NIMBL members in time for that full proposal submission. And then we go through our review stages and our final award decisions, which are targeted for mid-August of next year, and we'll again provide more details closer to the time, particularly for those teams who have been selected for full proposals. All right, so this webinar will be available by the end of this week. There'll also be a Q&A, which we will work out exactly the most convenient way to provide that. For those who are online, there is the ability to chat in your questions. Some of those will be similar questions from different people, and so we'll consolidate that and put it into a convenient form for you to view online. So I'll reiterate a few things. One, the full details of all the project calls, PC 3.1T, W, and G, are available as downloadable documents from the open public website for NIMBL. Those have all the details. Anyone interested in submitting a proposal should read those in detail. They give you all the information you need, but if you do have questions, please reach out to us at projectcalls@nimbl.org. These slides will be posted, but they are not all inclusive. There are additional examples and details that you can find in the online RFPs, request for proposals for 3.1 T, W, and G. So with that, we're going to conclude the formal part of the webinar. Again, we will post this online, as well as questions and answers that come up outside of the formal webinar.